Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast with Ron and Kristin, where leadership meets entertainment. This podcast features stories with names and certain aspects that have been changed to keep submissions private. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to another episode of the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast, where leadership meets entertainment. I'm Kristin Sokoloff, and I'm here with my co-host, Ron Ward. How's it going, Ron?
Kristin, it is going great. And just like you, I'm so excited that our podcast is being downloaded in all these countries.
Yes.
And it's just really taken off.
We picked up four more countries. So we're up to 59.
By the way, everyone, Kristin's obsessed with these stats now, so keep them coming.
Almost every day I'm texting you like, hey, 4 more countries, or, we're trending in 15 more cities. Pretty cool.
No, in addition, as everyone out there knows, you work hard. And then when this is an evening thing for us, usually after hours working, we're 3 hours apart. So there's a lot that goes into this. And from promoting and marketing and to prepping. So when you are doing something and it's adding value, it's a real sense of pride for me. And I'm very excited about it. I was talking to my daughter today, and I was only talking to her about pursuing, she's finishing her degree. And I said, hard work pays off. I said, Jansen, can you believe I was walking to my car one night, Kristin, and I was thinking about writing the book, and The Dirty Side of Leadership popped in my brain. I'm not joking. And I was like, oh my God, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the name of my book. And now to think about this podcast, it's just kind of crazy. But I only say that to say, if you pursue your dreams, you don't give up, big things can happen. That's for sure.
Yeah, they absolutely can. So today we're going to explore a topic that many of us have encountered throughout our careers, and that is cliques in the workplace. And we're not talking about mouse clicks here. We're talking about cliques, something that's been around for centuries, groups of people that form anytime you're in a social environment. And to start off, let's define what exactly we mean by workplace cliques. Now, cliques are informal groups or circles, and that's a big thing to note there. Informal. These are not created by the leadership teams, right? These just naturally occur over time. Groups and circles of individuals who share common interests, backgrounds, or social dynamics within an organization. And it's natural for people to form connections. Cliques can sometimes create an exclusive atmosphere that can be challenging to navigate. We've all been there, been through that. And we understand that it's natural that you like some coworkers more than others. I think we would be lying to say that that was not the case. But you may have more in common with some than others, and naturally you're going to spend more time with them. Or you might simply enjoy their company. I've always talked about how I always want to have someone around me who entertains me, right? So I don't care, what walk of life they came from. If they can make me laugh, I want them around me. So as a result, you're probably going to interact more and differently with these people that you want to be around, and you're going to form these closer bonds. So far, so good, right, Ron?
I guess.
However, the relationships serve as a clique when others outside that pair or that small group perceive that they're not welcome to join. And that's what we don't want to condone.
Kristin, I have a long history with cliques, and they became way more apparent when I got promoted. And what I would see, because we're going to cover more of the group thing, but I did have this happen. If you get one disgruntled employee, they always have a follower, and they will always recruit someone. And usually you can manage having a couple people, they're undermining you. You can't prove it. They're on the fringes, I call it, but it, and you can keep an eye on that. And a lot of times what I would do is I would not put those two on a project together. That helps some. But if people don't recognize that and you get that person undermining you, and if it grows more than 2 people, you really have a toxic clique. We're not going to cover that much today, but that is a really dangerous thing when it gets to that point of toxicity. And we're going to give some management advice, as we always do on this. But before we go into that, let's discuss the psychological and sociological aspects of cliques in the workplace. if you think back, it literally starts in elementary school. I can remember on the playground, there were certain people, and you don't even understand why when you're a kid, but you want to be a part of that particular group of people. Of course, we didn't know what the word clique was, but this goes right up into junior high and high school. And in my area, Kristin, and I want to ask you about yours, but in my high school, you really did have three factions. You had athletes or jocks, they called them. You had the really smart people, they called nerds. And we had what they called, it's vocational school, but we called it trade school. You're learning a trade. So you had those three, the jocks, the nerds, and trade school people. And truthfully, they didn't socialize that much. There was some real divides. How about your school?
I feel like mine was very unique. And even my husband, who went to my 20-year reunion not too long ago, was like, wow, this is a cool group of folks. We really didn't have these strong cliques that it seems that everyone else experienced. And I don't know, I felt like everyone I went to at least high school with, they just wanted to have fun. And the people that were maybe the nerdier people hung out with the jocks, and the jocks hung out with, we had that whole like the socias and oh gosh, what was that? The greasers and the socias. There was a bit of that played out, but everyone seemed to party together and to hang out together. So I had a very unique experience, and I know that is not the norm, but I consider myself blessed for that.
I will tell you this, though. I think no matter what the cliques would have been, it's interesting. I went back to my high school reunion, and I was a little bit nervous about it because some of these people I hadn't seen since I graduated. And we got there, and it was so nice. It was so warm. Everyone hugged. Like there were no more cliques, no more anything. How are you doing? How many kids did you, you know, that kind of stuff. And of course, with Facebook, you keep up with some people now that we used to not have that advantage, but you do now. And we had our own Facebook group that we formed. But talking about the psychological, and, you know, we talk about the psychological aspects of a lot of work involvement on this podcast.
Right.
And there's plenty more to follow.
I have to share something before we I have to just give my class of 99 Prairie High School some credit here, because we had, at our 20 year, we had somebody that we graduated with who showed up, and his job is literally a professional scary clown. And he has tattooed like fake blood onto his body. He literally brings a hammer and like nails into his body in different parts, you know, like his nostrils and all sorts of crazy stuff. We have this picture, and I think that he was concerned. I don't know if he thought he would be welcomed when he showed up naturally, right? It's a little scary. People were like, oh my gosh, that's so-and-so. And here we have the preppy valedictorian. I'm in the picture. And I was the jock. And then we have this scary clown and a bunch of other dudes that were athletes, all in this picture, just arms around each other, laughing. And I felt like that was the perfect depiction of what it was like, because I'm literally serious. I wish I could show it. I don't want to get in trouble by putting someone's picture out there. It's literally, he's a professional, like tattooed, scary clown, like pretty freaky looking, but he was welcomed in by the valedictorian and all the jocks. And it was such a beautiful thing. But I had to share that. It's pretty wild.
Good. When they find the bodies, you're going to wish he wasn't in that.
You know what? But I did wonder if he would have shown up and we weren't welcoming and nice. Who knows?
Oh, I was talking about you, Kristin. I wasn't talking about the clown guy.
Oh, gosh.
There's a serial killer in that group. We all know who it is.
Oh, good Lord.
Okay, so delving into that, the psychological parts of this.
Sorry, I cut you off.
I want to simplify it. No, that was a good, that's really cool. And that's how life should be.
Yeah.
But when you look at the psychological aspects, people are looking for, and it's Maslow's hierarchy of safety and security. So a lot of times they will join a clique to feel safe.
Right.
They want to feel secure. They don't want to be an outsider. They don't want to be alone. But also there's immaturity and insecurity. If someone is very insecure, they're always going to look for someone to watch out for them. They're not going to be an alpha in any shape or form. They're going to be a beta. So they're looking to join. And, you know, Kristin, we get asked a lot about employee retention.
Yeah.
And people, if they would understand that, everyone that comes into your company, your organization, your church group, anything it is, they're looking to join. Now, you always have the people who are outsiders. I'm not talking about outliers here, but most people want to join something. And we're going to get into the management role of this. But I wanted to put our leaders and managers on notice that people are looking to join something. So you play an important role in how that's navigated. So I got a very deep quote for you, Kristin.
All right.
And as Tony Stark said at the beginning of Iron Man, when they started to get into the Humvees, he was with Colonel James Rhodes, and Rhodes was really uptight. So they started to get in. Tony Stark wouldn't allow Colonel Rhodes to ride with him. He told him, he said, I'm in the Fun V, you're in the Humdrum V.
Oh, you seriously just quoted Tony Stark. That's amazing.
Go Iron Man.
Oh, my goodness.
I thought you would enjoy that.
I like that. I don't want to be in the humdrum V. That's for sure.
Kristin, we're in the Fun V, not the humdrum V.
Definitely.
If you're listening, feel free to quote me on that, or Tony, either way.
I think people should take inventory, like right now, like which one am I in? You know what I mean?
I like that.
Right? Take inventory. Like which Humvee are you in? Are you in the humdrum V or the fun V? Because there are so many people, and I had a political podcast for 2.5 years, and there a lot of guests that I had on, some people were angry, right? Because we're talking politics and they're talking about just so many things happening. And then some people, my favorite people, approached it with humor. And they explained that the reason they do that is because people don't want to be around that humdrum person. And if you can talk about something serious, but do it in a way that doesn't turn everyone off or make them feel depressed after walking away from you, that is an art right there.
Kristin, you may have inspired me. I'm putting together an 8-hour training program for San Antonio, Texas. I might use this. I might use that exact clip out of the movie.
Do it. Which one are you in?
We'll see what happens. Which one are you in?
Yeah.
Here's the next phase. We've talked about insecurity, safety, and those kind of things. And then there's the disgruntled group. These are the people who victimize themselves, and every agency's got them. And if you're a manager, you're shaking your head. You get the victims, and what the victims do, they're in the humdrum V, and they are going to always get somebody to ride with them. As I said before, they're going to recruit someone, and sometimes it can be deserved, frankly. If you're got a poorly run business and the upper management is aloof, I call it the ivory tower, and they don't know what's going on, they don't care about the concerns of the employees, they can make this a lot worse, and they can almost force people into cliques. So they have to be careful of that. But you also have these people that they're going to make themselves a victim no matter what. No matter what management does, the executives do, they're going to find a way to complain, and they're going to convince others that management is out to get us, and they're going to show that, management has its favorites, all that stuff. So there's always a little bit of truth on both ends. But I was the victim when I got promoted. I was the victim of some people who, no matter what I did, I had a couple people against me, and they would find a way to victimize themselves from whatever decision I made. And as a side note, if you have that going on, you got to manage that. You may even have to take personnel action. Now, you never hear that on other podcasts. They always say, well, you got to have meetings and all this. Yes, you do want to make every effort, but there's a point in time when you got to deal with it. Yeah. And that's exactly what I did. And it's painful and it's not fun, but it has to be done.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Anyway.
And that rhymed. I loved that. It's painful. It's not fun. Has to be done. I mean, there we go. It's so true, though. You have to go there. It's not all. This isn't a fantasy land. And I think that's why I love the dirty side of leadership so much. You are going to have to engage and take proper steps, utilizing HR, my best friend, right? Where you're going to have to engage them at some point, because you can only coach so much and have so many conversations. When you don't see the needle moving, you have to go to the next step that carries more weight.
Kristin, that's great. And I'm going to work in a story right here, even though I was going to wait, because you kind of said it. And we're trying to Kristin and I are trying to make up with HR. We've had this love-hate relationship. We have some HR listeners, that's all I'm saying. And we appreciate them. So I did have a positive experience with HR. This happened at the academy, and you've got a firearms and safety group, trainings and skills branch. You've got two different branches. It's kind of like the jocks and the nerds. Not really, but you could put it in those categories. So there were a group of people, we're in Charleston. There's a group of people go on the boat on the weekends. So some of the people started coming to me because they felt excluded, exactly what we've talked about. I went to HR because this is after hours and on the weekends. You can't dictate people's lives on weekends. And here's the unique thing about the job that I was on is almost everybody has to move here. It's not like we had local people. We had people even from your neck of the woods, Kristin. So we only had one. The last 10 years I was there, we had one South Carolinian. Everyone else was all over the United States.
Wow.
Which is very interesting, by the way, who aligns and all that. But anyway, there's cliques. So some of the new people coming in, I guess if they were in the cool club, they got to go on the weekend ventures or the after hours, happy hours, that type stuff. So I went to HR, and basically what they said is you can inquire and you can talk to someone, but you can't dictate the weekends. And I knew that, or after hours. But what I did learn, and this is in my online leadership course, you always have a pseudo leader. You've got someone that's leading that clique. It might be one or two people, but if you have your ear to the ground, you're going to know who that is. So what I did is I went to one of the leaders of the clique and I explained, this is what's happening. And I didn't do it in an accusatory way. I said, you know what? You have every right, from happy hours to boating and, all of that. Yeah. I said, but I would appreciate it if you would attempt to include more people, maybe send more invitations, especially the new people. They've moved here. They don't know anyone.
Right.
And we made some progress with that. Now, as time went on, it wasn't as noticeable, I guess, but these were very strong people. They got jobs in other places. But there was a brief period of time when I had a real problem with cliques, and going to those pseudo leaders was the best way that I knew how to at least make some progress, and we did.
Yeah. So the person or people planning these excursions or after hours adventures or whatever, were they in an actual leadership role or more of the leader within the grouping of people?
I was talking, they're pseudo leaders, not necessarily a title. Now, some of them did have they were like senior training officer or something like that. Okay. But it's who the people just decide as a leader. And I tell everyone, there's always pseudo leaders in every organization. Right. And you better get those on your team. You better go to those pseudo leaders and get them on your team, because they are the influence of the crowd or the group. And that's why I did it that way.
Yeah, that was smart. So they were technically an individual contributor, but they had basically that person that people gravitate towards.
That's exactly right. I was watching Conan one night, and I love his internet show. But what happened was, he finds out, when you're Conan, you got all these different companies sending food to the office. So they would get cakes and ice cream. Well, there was an internal email with only a certain group, and you can YouTube this. You would love it, Kristin. It's hilarious. So Conan gets tipped off that there's a secret email. And he puts cameras in the break room or the conference room. So all of a sudden the cake gets there, and next thing you know, 5 minutes later, different people. And it's the select food group. They come in there. So he walks in and confronts them. It's hilarious to hear them try to explain themselves.
That's
because
funny.
The other people weren't getting any of the free food.
Yeah, I could see, just even though that's like a humorous piece of it, what you were talking about before, even though that person was an individual contributor, that naturally, when you know that your coworkers are going out and doing something as a group and you're excluded, there's gonna be just this tension in the air, and you're gonna feel excluded, and it can be a little bit awkward. So I think that's great that you nipped that, even though it wasn't someone that actually had rank over others. That was a good move. That has to happen when that's taking place.
I do have to be very clear. I don't know that I nipped it. I think I minimized it.
Okay.
I think they became a little more open So
Right. Because anyone that is, and I know we're on the same page with this, but as a leader, it should never be that way. It should be come one, come all, right? Like anytime as a leader you're putting something together, if you're after hours, right?
mhm.
Everyone should be invited. In my opinion, I think that that's pretty standard. It shouldn't be a select grouping of people. But so that was a tricky one that you had to approach there.
Yeah, and then we had singles and married people. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
dynamics into it. I'm not totally
Right.
judging. Like, there's certain things that if you're married and got a family, you're not going to go. And so
Right.
there's a lot to this.
There's
It's
a
a
lot. Yeah.
complicated issue.
But I like that you addressed it and like even just touching on it
Yeah.
to make people aware of how it's being perceived, I think is huge right there. So I want to touch on, how we affect and how these cliques affect office morale and productivity. When one part of a team is praised but not the other, that alone can create a perception of value, that one team is encouraged and the other devalued. And so what that can look like in terms of employee productivity is important to think about. You're probably going to get great work from that team that's getting praised. And while the others band together into a disgruntled mass, we've talked about that earlier in this podcast, they may begin to show a disinterest and an indifference in their work and the company. And on the other hand, those who are getting praised may also form their own clique. And it's one of the success and respect clique, the popular kids, so to speak, from high school. They want to be defined by greatness and success and not associated with those grumpy underachievers.
Yeah. No, it's very, very true. As we said, there's a lot of dynamics. Um,
Yeah.
People do align themselves with various groups, whether it's a matter of comfort, as I said, safety, and all these other things. And a lot of people want to be with the cool kids.
Mm-hmm.
There's an appearance that they have more fun, that they got more going on.
Right.
And then you have some employees who just want to do their job and not be involved, but they're guilty by association. They feel
Right.
like they're getting, sucked into one of these groups and they really don't want to be there. That's the mature, secure people. And I
Yeah.
find that interesting because I told Kristin off the air that I had a situation. I transferred to a main office. This is when I was actually a U.S. probation officer, and there was an obvious clique. And it was about 30, 40 minutes every morning that the certain group would meet in the supervisor's office. They welcomed me with open arms. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the group, but I was the defensive tactics instructor. So I brought a little clout, I think, with that. So they welcomed me right in. I go in, I have coffee about 2 or 3 mornings, and they're talking about all kinds of inappropriate stuff. And so I decided I got to break myself out of this clique. This is not good. And it was wasting a lot of my time.
Right.
And ultimately, I think I told you this one time, Kristin, or I mentioned on the podcast that I moved all the way down the other end of the hallway. It was a small office. It had a window, and it was close to the chief. So some people did give me a hard time, but it wasn't that I was trying to get close to the
Yeah.
chief. I wanted out of all of that activity because my office was right next
Yes.
to the copy machine and all that. I'm probably
Mm.
ADD because
Yeah.
I could not focus.
Yeah. Well, something very similar happened to me and my team towards the end of my banking career. I had my team that was up sitting in a cube farm. And for those who haven't worked in that, you can hear everything, but you don't know who exactly is saying what. And my team was sitting amongst a grouping of people that I would consider quite unprofessional. And so from other people across the cube wall, I was getting reports of, oh, I heard your team talking about this or
Mm,
speaking poorly of this. And I was like, no, that's not, those are not my teammates. That's the other group that slammed right next to them. That is the unprofessional. So it was very frustrating for me. And I did bring it up to my leadership because I didn't like that. It's a reputation thing, even though I knew who was and wasn't saying it. The other folks clearly were unclear. And then that goes right to the leader, right? Speed of the leader, speed of the pack.
that's right.
And so I had to address that, and we did have some folks moved. And so that's something, even though you might know what your team is and isn't doing, you have to think of perception. So I like what you did by removing yourself from an area that you weren't able to operate at max, or at least, had too many distractions around you. And I had to do the same for my team.
I'm just curious. Now, this goes way back to like episode, I don't remember, 4 or 5. Was Tapeworm Guy, was he in the cube farm?
No, that was a gal too. No, that was a branch.
Folks, if you're one of the 58 countries that are listening, you got to go back and find out about the tapeworm. And if you're one of our new listeners in the U.S., you don't want to miss that story.
What episode? I think that might have been My Coworker is Annoying.
It is.
Because, we were talking about how there was just an unprofessionalism and a lack of boundaries, I believe, is when that came up. Mm-hmm. But true story.
You go ahead, Kristin.
That's a good merch. Something about a tapeworm.
Well, we do. Yeah, Kristin and I have been talking about merch, and we're coming up with some cool things on it.
Some cool stuff. Hey, people have been asking, and so we're like, you know what? Why not? So we're going there.
But if we do it, it's going to be unique. You can bank on that.
Exactly. Yeah, not the status quo. So for newcomers, Cliques can be a company culture killer. And we're talking about newcomers, you're onboarding, brand new to the company or the department. Culture killer. And you want to think about new employees who come into your company. They're just looking for a place to fit in. We've all felt that before, right? I remember relocating from the Northwest, and I moved to New York City, and I was working in the Empire State Building at the time. And I did not think I was going to be welcomed, right? I'm like this blonde. I had braces at the time. I didn't feel like I fit in at all, but I was completely welcomed with open arms. But there's that uncertainty in the beginning, and you just don't know where you're going to land. And so when they see groups of people breaking off for lunch or a work collab or what seems to be a secret meeting, they wonder how they can become a part of it all and which crowd is the right crowd. So there's just so much to that.
There really is.
Yeah.
So as we've talked a lot about the workplace cliques, let's delve into the impact on the individual and overall work environment. And like you said, especially for new employees, you don't even know which clique you're supposed to be in, even if you wanted to join. So again, we're going to get into management. I know some people are thinking this is all management issues, and there is a lot of that, and we'll get to that. But think about how people feel in these situations. Or there's some people take a lot of pride in being in the clique, and we're talking to you as well. If you're listening, you're going to have to be more inclusive.
Yeah.
Cliques serve to create exclusion, favoritism, and the creation of us versus them. And I definitely saw that. Even sometimes, even the high performers can get a little bit of sense of arrogance and think they're better than others, which is cliquish also. And Kristin, we didn't go into it, but I was thinking about even in college, you got fraternities and sororities. I remember there was a particular, one of the upper echelon fraternities. I mean, it was such a clique. They did the same parties. They wore the same shirts. And it kind of sickened me a little bit. I've always been an individual guy, but it was so obvious in those fraternities. And I taught a criminal justice class at a college. And believe it or not, they compared gangs and fraternities, and they had the criteria, and it was like symbols, but they wear the same clothing, they have secret meetings, they have excessive drinking. Like, it was unbelievable how many characteristics those fraternity sororities had with gangs.
Wow.
And I'd never thought of that before.
You know what? I think politicians also. Think about politics and how much of that is similar to gangs and sororities. It's just wild.
Well, you and I talked about that, that I listened to a podcast, so I have no way to validate this, but it said that over 70% of the American presidents were narcissists. And I see so much of that, even on both sides of the aisle. I think the power of it does corrupt people. And it's
I agree.
Interesting dynamic. Go ahead.
Definitely. So, and I want to bring up a few. I have one of our listeners used to work for like an upscale fashion line. And she was telling me that basically the clique that was established at that company was like, who has money and can actually afford to wear what was being sold, and that it was a very visible and palpable divide on, yes, we work for the same company, but some of us can afford to actually wear the clothing that we sell and some of us cannot, right? And I can only imagine how awkward that was. And I know somebody else, one of our other listeners, wrote in, because I put on my Instagram what we were going to be talking about, and they were saying that at their company, there was this a group. It was almost like the smoker clique, and I don't really know anybody personally that smokes anymore, to be honest. But I definitely, looking back, I can visualize the smokers sitting outside the window, and so you have like that smoker clique. That's not a clique I want to be a part of. But then the opposite is what they were saying, is they had the let's go work out. I think you're part of this one, Ron. Work out on the lunch break, right? You're like, you come back all sweaty using the office shower. So that was one. And then people around them kind of felt like, oh, like I don't know. I don't fit in, I guess, because I don't bike on my
I already
lunch
mentioned
break
this on the podcast, but it was funny when we were running and we would run right past the smokers. They were in this little area. You're like, hey.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's a funny dynamic. And so it's pretty wild. So it was interesting to get different people's takes on a clique isn't always what you think of, right? It's just
True.
How these people naturally gravitate towards each other. I know at my last company, there were a lot of us that were really into our health and fitness, and we were getting into cold plunge together, the Wim Hof method. And some of us went off to do Wim Hof training, and we got all geared up. We were going to go mountain climbing because we have so many mountains here in the Pacific Northwest. So we didn't form a clique per se, because we invited like everyone in the cube around us. But it was like we had this common interest and this goal of being this healthy, grouping of people that wanted to better ourselves. So naturally, we all would hang out with each other. So they just appear sometimes, and that is okay. But we are here to make sure you understand when it's gone too far or gone in the wrong direction. And as always, it's time to explore strategies and practical advice for individuals who find themselves dealing with cliques at work, and what you can do about the cliques in the workplace. And leaders need to walk the walk and talk the talk when it comes to breaking down barriers in the workplace. And for instance, you may not even realize that cliques aren't exclusive to the staff.
Mm-hmm.
And middle managers, you talk a lot about, that was an interesting dynamic, right? Middle managers or even upper management can create force fields around themselves, cutting off from the rest of the company, leading to the feelings of uncertainty. I think we've all felt uncertain at some point. And that's why I really gravitate towards a candid communicator. I like to know where I stand, right? Good or bad. I want to know where I stand. I think most people crave that. And do you want me I can jump into this listener submission?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Katrina wrote us and said, my boss has this little group of favorites, and it's very obvious to the rest of us. He even goes to lunch with them on a regular basis. We all know who's going to get promoted before the interviews even start. What should I do? That would be really frustrating.
Yeah. Well, let's pick on managers a little bit, since Katrina prompted us. And no matter what happens, management, especially upper management, middle management, you play a role in everything, because I've seen managers who just wash their hands. Like, I'm not worried about cliques. The problem is these small things grow, and then things get out of control, and you wonder how it happens. So you do take some initiative to minimize the cliques, especially this exclusivity that we've talked about. So to build an atmosphere of safety and bring down the walls of distrust, focus on understanding, value, and respect. And it's up to the leaders to set the tone. Mm-hmm. The first thing is set expectations. To get this right, the respect has to start at the top. Model behaviors and the atmosphere that you expect from your staff. If you're meeting with the same group all the time, then your staff's going to follow suit.
Right.
So If you want an open dialogue with your team, you have to be willing to listen. If you want inclusion, you have to be inclusive. If you want trust, you need to provide transparency. And sometimes that does take listening and talking and setting the example. There's a lot you can do without having to say a word by the example that you set.
Right, right. And that it's funny, I just talked about how I thrive under transparency, right? We want to know, most people want to know where they stand. And to your point, we have to be willing to listen. And if you say you want your employees' input, you have to accept it. It's not always going to be exactly what you want to hear. That's just not the reality. And you don't want to meet their inquiries with defensiveness. I just saw, have you seen the Blue Angels?
I
So
haven't.
it's a documentary on the Blue Angels. They've been around since the 40s, and this is the creme de la creme of the Air Force pilots, right?
Yes.
And I just watched this documentary. It's on Amazon Prime. I actually went and saw it in the theater, and then I watched it again when it came out on Prime. But there was a point where, and these are elite, and that's an understatement. One of the guys was giving feedback. They do all those crazy, they're flying 18 inches wing to wing, 18 inches apart. It's just unfathomable. One of the pilots was defensive when he was critiqued by one of the other pilots. He basically was told he was a little sloppy in one of his maneuvers. And I was so turned off watching how he was defensive. And I think if more people could see themselves on camera, I wonder what he thinks about himself, because it's funny because my mom went and watched it after me, and I said, did you notice that guy being super defensive? She's like, yeah, I didn't like it at all. I'm like, right? No one likes that.
They had a crash not long ago too, correct?
2017, I believe,
Okay.
was the last. And those crashes are going to be fatalities. So yeah, they had a fatality in 17 and 7.
So Kristin, just jump in real quickly. In my book, I talk about 8 magic words, and I teach these when I go out. And I've had some companies use this, and it's 8 words. Are you getting what you need from me? And I say, imagine if supervisors would say those words to employees, employees would say those words to supervisors, and a honest conversation ensued, honest dialogue.
Yeah.
I said it would eliminate probably 85% of all problems in an organization if people would just talk. But if you shut down, or if you shut down an employee the first time, they're not going to come back with suggestions.
Right.
That's the sad part about it.
Yeah. No, you're spot on. We have to respect the opinion, whether you agree or not. And if you're open to employees making a case for something, show them how it's done. If you set the tone, your team should follow your lead. And that might require some coaching.
That's exactly right. You can't just allow somebody to come in and disrespect you. There's got to be rules of engagement.
Exactly.
Next is practice your core values. Your company should have a list of values that dictate how you treat each other and how you treat customers and so forth. They should be available for all to see. And in my book, I talked about a vision statement is not good enough to be plastered on a website. And that's what most people do. Or they can quote a vision statement, but they don't understand the mission. They don't understand the values of the company. And that takes management repeating that over and over and explaining how your work intertwines with your values. I use the example, there's a substance called Kevlar that's in ballistic vests. And I was over all the ballistic vests in the country for our agency, so I knew a little more about ballistic vests than most people. But Kevlar is used in brake pads. So when our ballistic vests would be, destructive, because you can't let those get out in the market, you got to destroy them when they're old, they would be used as brake pads. So I said, imagine if your values in your company, your vision statement is, we're going to have the best brake pads in the world. And somebody comes to you and says, hey, I can sell you a substance that's cheaper than Kevlar. And the company's going to make all this money. Well, you go back to your core values and it says you're going to have the best or the safest brake pads, then you're not going to align yourself with this cheaper stuff. You're going to stick with Kevlar. That's how values can hold things together. They have to mean something. The vision statement has to mean something. It has to be part of the fabric of the company. And in those scenarios, I think the problem is everyone loses sight of the vision, the mission, and the values of the company, and then things just start to unravel.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, something here is recognize your team members' value, right? Like there's that value that keeps showing up throughout our conversation, and have respect for the individual and show appreciation for what they offer. And it's important that we equip our teams to share a common vision. And then everyone uniquely adds their own value to the mission. We all bring something different to the table. We don't want to hire mini me's, right? That's a very dysfunctional way to lead. And for instance, do you have a steady Eddie on the team who doesn't make waves, performs day in and day out? He may not get kudos for a dynamite innovation, but Eddie plays a significant role and should be rewarded for it. And I'll be honest, I will be the first to admit, I have talked about this before. I've made a hiring decision and hired the flashier person. And you know what? 6 months after hiring them, they were looking for the bigger, better deal, right?
Yep.
And they weren't all I thought they were going to be. I wish I would have gone for the steady Eddie in that position. So I have a lot of gratitude towards that worker bee, or that I like that steady Eddie. And often we spend most of our time praising those superstars and guiding the troublemakers, if you will. But the steady Eddies, they fall through the cracks because they're always there keeping you afloat.
Yep, that's right.
And they're not getting your attention, good or bad. So I think another chance to take inventory on who you have on your team.
Exactly. Also, we said be inclusive, but there's some managers try to force people to do things after hours. People have kids, they've got lives, like we're all going bowling. And if somebody doesn't go, then the manager tends to push them out, exclude them, or use it against them later. You can't operate that way. You certainly want to invite everyone, but you have to recognize that there's other mitigating circumstances that might be involved, and you just have to move on. But lead by example. Dale Carnegie said this, the key to a lasting relationship is to become genuinely interested in other people. A good manager is going to understand why someone is not going to the after hours, and at least they know. But if you don't even know your people, you're just like, why is Jennifer not here? And then it leads to gossip, as we've already covered, and speculation. So that's a slippery slope.
Yeah, it really is. And not everybody is an extrovert. I know I shared this funny meme recently, and it's this guy out in front of his church, and he's like the church greeter. And the little clip said, or the caption said, a church greeter ready to completely wreck an introvert's entire day.
Yep.
And he was like out there. I mean, it was a joke. He was out there like stretching, acting like he's all gearing up. But you know what's funny? You know how many people messaged me and said that I get anxiety approaching the church greeter, right? And even myself, I'm an extrovert, but there is a bit of awkwardness because there's usually like 5, 6 of them. You're like, who's going to approach me first? Who do I grab the pamphlet from? Like there is a little bit of that awkwardness, even for someone like myself. Have you ever felt that with the church greeter?
Oh, yeah. And when I do training, I don't know about the church greeter, but when I do training, I have to be careful. Like if you call someone out, you kind of have to watch that. You're called them up front. Could be against their will. They might be an introvert.
Right.
That's something here's what I do. I'm just going to tell that this is the agency's secret. I always talk to a couple of people just in case, because the last thing you want to do is be up front and go, can I have a volunteer? And you're just standing there and these people paid you to come train. So I always, I have a couple of secret volunteers.
Yes, that's smart. I generally did that as well when it was a large grouping of people and I wasn't sure what engagement was going to be like. So I think that's just being smart. But so not everybody, my whole point in sharing that church greeter story was not everybody is one of those that gains something from going out and socializing after hours. For some people, just being at work 40 hours a week completely drains them. Because they're not social people by nature. So, all right, pivoting back to if your company culture has gotten away from you and your workforce has gone deep into Cliques, it's not too late to hit the reset button. But a warning here, it may take some humility on your part. I know you and I, Ron, we're all about humility and just being really transparent with things. It's important that we let our teams know we've made a mistake. Maybe it was by not providing enough information on the type of team, the company, or the culture that we want. And, just for those listening, don't be surprised if you're met with a dubious look among the staff. If they were to speak up, they would say, "Oh, we're doing this again, huh?" I think we all know that look.
Yeah.
But it's important that we still go there.
Yeah. And when you do this mea culpa, you'd better follow through. It's incumbent upon leaders to get the feedback loop going, and that's really coaching. That's coaching up, coaching down, coaching sideways.
Yeah.
You want to have a culture of feedback. And if you're saying those 8 magic words, are you getting what you need from me? Be ready for that conversation, as Kristin said.
Yeah.
If you don't practice your company value, they're just words without action. Take actions and find out how great an inclusive, trusting, safe workplace can be. Taking time to build a positive environment can help increase employee engagement and productivity.
Yeah.
I will tell you that I had this really cool manager, and he had this clique that was forming, and they would meet in someone's office. He just started pretending he was going to the restroom because the restroom was down the hall, and he would just stop in. "Hey guys, what's up? How are you doing?" So he started chatting with them.
Taking them off guard.
Yeah, he did it like 2 or 3 times a week, and he said it just started dispersing. So I don't know if that works for you, but I thought it was so funny. It was so cool. Trust me, if upper management shows up, the clique will disperse.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that's genius, actually, and quite comical.
It was great. He just interrupted the clique.
Good for him.
Yeah. So anyway, Kristin, this has been very fun, but we recognize, as we always do with this podcast, and the dirty side of leadership is that sometimes your strategies don't work, and that's where it takes the courage. But you have to act, because these things will fester, they will grow, and the next thing you know, you had one victim, then you got 2, and then you've got a group of people undermining you. So take the necessary steps, lead by example, and things will certainly go a lot better. That's for sure.
They sure will. I love it. Thank you for that, Ron. It's a good close.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, be the leader you're meant to be.
We'll see you next week.
The Dirty Side of Leadership podcast is brought to you by Forward Operations. If you'd like to book Ron or Kristin for speaking events, training, or executive coaching, visit forwardoperations.com. Be the leader you're meant to be.